Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. So today we wanted to talk all about business and friendships and mixing them, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, our experiences with doing that, because Dev and I have been running our podcast for a good amount of time now. I feel like we've been a good duo, and we also have experiences of dabbling in business and both individually and with other people, and I feel like along the way we've learned a lot of lessons. So we just want to come and share them, because something that I've realised quite a lot is it's so common for people to actually jump headfirst into business with their friends and people maybe they even think they know or not that close to, but they think they're going in with a business mindset, so it will work out well for everybody, but not necessarily think of the long term and how that can impact you in a business sense. And not just that, actually, and from the point of view of your actual existing relationships with each other as well. So we just want to talk about maybe our do's and don'ts and our experiences with that. But I'll start with you, Dev. What has your experience been so far working with me?
With you? Oh my God. So obviously with you, it's been a dream. I think for anyone listening.
You have to say that because I'm right here.
I'm being paid.
I slipped to some cash.
I think if for anyone who's listening and for anyone who's maybe started to understand like mine and Farah's relationship, we have so many similarities that still shock me. There's still sometimes
Crazy.
things that come up that I'm like, what the hell? And I think that those similarities create like compassion and empathy for each other. Mm-hmm. And we work very similarly. We've had similar jobs. We've had similar personal backgrounds. And I just think working together in a business capacity, it doesn't even feel like working together in a business capacity, like quote unquote. Even our planning sessions for the podcast, we get excited when we're talking about things. I don't think we've had any difficult conversations at all. Like there's been no friction, I would say, that's like negative. And we both have the same vision and like feelings about our business goals together. And also out with the podcast, I think we both we talk about business and how to grow our own business goals like outside of Double Life in a really positive and like uplifting way. And for me, that's just been like honestly just a dream, which has been great because I think in the context of this episode, business and friendships, when we started like a joint venture before, I was really, really naive in terms of I was that person. I thought you could just jump right in and mix business and friendships and it was going to be completely grand, because if you have the same values and like as friends, then you're going to have the same values as business partners. And I think my naivety really got me into a lot of trouble in terms of like I did not expect things to play out the way they did at the speed in which they did. But I think that was a good lesson because we've taken everything that happened and kind of improved on it tenfold in ways like we run Double Life, which I think is really nice. But at the same time, it's not really impacted how I would have, like if I were to set up a podcast or a business with someone now, I think I'm wary of more things than I was before. I think before I was just very like, I assumed the best
Naivety,
of every situation. Yeah, extreme naivety. So I think that's been like my biggest lesson in terms of mixing business and friendships, because you can't assume that people will behave the same way in business that they do if there's no money and like contractual commitments and all these kind of things involved. Which I think is just a great lesson to have in business in general. If you're an entrepreneur, you just cannot be naive, because I think being an entrepreneur or being self-employed or being in this kind of like space where you're working a lot based off of trust and like people's values and like people kind of being on their own, like in their own lanes a lot of the time, I think it's good to operate on a sense of like in the opposite way to being naive.
Yeah, I think it's that too trusting element as well of like how people will behave in difficult situations, because you don't have to just think about, oh, when, you know, we get big successes as a business or like when things are on the up, what on earth happens when shit hits the fan, and how is each individual dealing with that? And if that clashes, then you have a big problem, because that's normally when issues arise in general. And then that can affect your like outside of business relationships as well. So depending on how close you are to that person, that can just have a domino effect on all the different relationships, and also your actual business, and how that continues to function.
Yeah.
But I've been involved in, I guess, trying to set up businesses. I would say I don't know if I'd fully call these things businesses, because they were born out of hobbies. And like, so when I first set up like my YouTube channel, I did that as a duo, and that's like way before any of like this I created. And then the podcast that we had as a trio before we started Double Life, those two experiences actually taught me that two things. Starting businesses with people that you don't actually know fully that well is probably not the best thing to do. Second of all, having a business with people that have completely different personalities to you is also, just based on my previous experience, is also not the best thing to do. And actually something my mum told me a while ago, when we were going through like dismantling our like previous podcast, is that if you are trying to have like an equal, like position in your business with other people, so say like one of you is not employing the other, you're actually like the founders, co-founders, or you're actually on a very even playing field. If you have very differing personalities, I used to think that was a huge benefit to the business, because it's like, okay, well, their strengths are my weaknesses, and we even each other out. Actually, no, that doesn't really work if you're trying to be on the same level, because all what happens is clashes.
Yeah.
All you'll have is problems when you're that different. And that's something I learned a lot, is because that happened to me twice, when I was like quite a different personality to the person I was trying to be on an equal playing field with, and it just didn't work. But I think since us two are so similar in personalities, I feel like that's probably what has helped us get to this stage, and how we've been so in sync, is because we are both like very similar in personalities, and what we've envisage, whichever the word is.
I think both.
But what we see the future of the podcast being is very aligned. And I feel like just the way we deal with things, like our just ways of being,
styles.
Yeah, everything is so similar that it clicks and it makes sense, and we don't have to like battle. And I think the only way we would benefit from having someone come into our business, being a completely different personality type to us and a different working style altogether, is for us to employ a person with those skills, not necessarily have them as like a third leader. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's something I've learned a lot, is that it's not really a benefit to you to do that. Whereas I used to think that was. I was like, oh, well, it's okay, because like what they lack, I have, and vice versa. So this is going to be a huge success because of that. And logically that still makes sense in my head, but the going through it and experiencing that, actually that's not what actually creates that success. Is that you have people in your business and within a team that have these strengths, and that have these skills and things that you can draw on, but they don't have to be your co-founders and like CEO level and top level and equal to you in your business. Like that's not how it should work. But I think that's also been proven to me by like how we've worked so well together, and how we've been able to like be consistent and grow, and like have such a smooth sailing experience, I guess, and like continuing like what we have now. But I don't know if you had the same feeling about like the type of people that you'd go into business with. Did you actually like deep it in terms of, oh, I'm like, it's beneficial to be in business with a certain type of person compared to like who you are and how you deal with things?
Yeah, I think I was on the same, again, no shock, same page as you, in terms of like, I thought that exactly in terms of like the things that are my weaknesses, if those are the strengths of my co-founders, it's going to be like literally the best business ever. We're going to see so much success, all this stuff. And I see your point about like, oh, maybe having that on a co-founder basis wasn't as helpful as maybe starting something noticing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then outsourcing or delegating to make up for those strengths and weaknesses. I think that is definitely the approach that we will hopefully be taking, but also is probably the approach we should have started with. Whereas I think I was the same as you in terms of like seeing that as a huge positive and reason to mix business and friendship as well. I think for me, since we had our previous podcast, I've learned that mixing business and friendship is a lot like getting married to someone, in terms of like, when you marry someone, you're marrying them to be with them forever through all these different versions of themselves.
Through the good and the bad.
Through the good and the bad. It means that when you're going through the bad, you're going to have the capability to talk it out, come out with like a productive solution, and stay together after that. And I didn't quite realize that that was the depth in which that relationship would be in a business context as well with friendships. And I think I should have done, because like I think there was no difference in the kind of person or the personality type that I was in business with before we started the business or after we started the business. Like that personality type was the same, but I just thought that those strengths of that personality type would help our business. Whereas I think now I'm like, well, the strengths of certain personality type are good individually. They may not do well like together, like in a marriage, like in a way where we'll work together to come out of problems with solutions. Yeah, like compatibility. And I don't think I really considered that as well, which is difficult, because then I don't want that to deter me from like never being in business with someone who's just a different personality type to me in future. I think what I'm just going to be wary of is the fact that like, if I were to marry this person or be with them for the rest of my life, like I'm being like obviously thinking platonically, would this work? Like, will we get through bad times? I think that's what I'm kind of thinking of, because I think I just glazed over that before.
Same. But I think what you're referring to there is the vetting process. I don't think we very much had any at all at that point, in terms of like, if you are going to decide to actually marry someone romantically, you ain't picking someone that you've known for 2 minutes, and you're not picking someone thinking short term.
Yeah. And also like for example, if I were to marry someone and they're super driven, super ambitious, and super focused on themselves, and I saw that as like, oh, those are great personality traits, like they're going to do so well in business. But when I marry them, they are still super driven, ambitious, focused on themselves, regardless of me. Like not willing to like, you know, like work together to come out of problems, work together when times are tough. Like they've still got all those personality traits, but it's still only for themselves. Like that's the kind of thing I'm even thinking of, in terms of like, there was no, you know, like business and friendship. You need to combine so much. Like I don't think you can ever revert back to just being plain old friends after you mix business. And I don't think that's in a bad sense. It's just more that when you're thinking about business, you're thinking about livelihood, you're thinking about reputation, you're thinking about, there's so many more things that come into play that don't necessarily come into play with a friendship. And so you get to know someone on a much, much deeper level, in terms of like how self-sacrificial they are.
What's important also to recognize is that extra responsibility that you have for each other, which you wouldn't necessarily have in a friendship. It's like,
I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I think you are. Is that you, if you're going to enter that partnership, I feel like depending on the type of person that decides to enter a business partnership versus a friendship, the level of responsibility required from you to, you know, do X, Y, and Z within that partnership, you have to acknowledge it differently. And you have to, like you were saying, like those personality types that you have to make the effort to actually mold within the business, to actually make sure everyone is working together. It's not you on your own and you're got this little empire going yourself. And maybe that's the problem sometimes, is people go into business and they think that they're going in with employees, versus some people think that they're on an even playing field. And that's probably a big communication issue, is that intention behind working with other people. Because I guess if you are going into your business with the mindset of, okay, well, I'm the top dog and I'm working with these people because they serve a purpose in it, versus like, we're all doing this because we have the same purpose and the same, expectations, and we bring just as much value to the table, that's a very, very different mindset. And I think when those mindsets aren't aligned because they haven't been communicated properly, that's probably when you're going to see a lot of difficulties in your business, and it won't flourish, because at that point you're both working towards completely different like goals, and your thought process towards where the business is headed for you as an individual as well. Because you've got to think about it, when you're in business, you have a role that you are individually also going to see level up, and whatever that is, if it's you, for example, as a 3, you're going to level up individually but also together in the same way. Or are you seeing yourself as like the actual CEO that's going to, go and do X, Y, and Z because of the leverage or whatever? So you see yourself as an individual, yes, but you also all have to be aligned in how you see your role play out even in the future. And that's probably also something that didn't really align for us previously, which is why it fell apart.
Yeah, I think you've perfectly encapsulated what I was trying to say. It's the responsibility element that completely changes if you're doing anything with another person. And the reason I keep kind of comparing it to marriage is because that's how marriage works.
Yeah.
Like, when you marry someone else, you're then not just responsible for yourself or the other person, you're responsible for your unit together. And that was definitely lacking in what we tried to start previously. And that's something that I've now learned is like, that's necessary for a business, whether it's 1 or 10 people. That's what you need to survive. You all need to be like working towards one common goal together. You shouldn't be in your own lanes kind of doing things that you're good at in a certain direction, but like moving completely different to each other.
It's like, from the outside you look like you're one unit, but then on the inside you're like completely veering off in separate directions, and that's not the way to have a thriving business. You got to really be very tight. So whoever you start a business with, that communication, I think that is the main thing. And
that's the main do.
Actually acknowledging that, like you said, the commitment level is like that of a marriage. If you think about it, legal documents you have to sign, like, you are actually like tying yourselves together anyway. So treat it like that, and you'll probably be a lot better off, because you'll first actually make sure, am I sure I really want to be like tied to this individual for eternity,
forever?
Yeah, and actually like go that deep. Because I'm not gonna lie, like, previously I never really deeped the idea of going. I thought as easy as I went into it, I could get out of it, and I thought it wasn't really, it's not that I didn't take it seriously, but it's that I didn't understand, or I underestimated the level of, like, how much it would attach me to someone else, if that makes sense. Like, you're locked in at that point. Like, you have to take it more seriously than like, oh. And I think the trouble is that vetting process beforehand, and actually making those conscious decisions of, okay, is this a responsible decision to even make in the first place? I feel like that's the problem. Because when you do go into things with friends and people that you think and people that you feel like you're close to, and you understand their values, and you feel like you're aligned in so many things, it doesn't feel that serious or that much of a risk. You get blinded by that relationship that is existing, when actually you should really realize that whole business relationship is going to be a completely different entity. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that forget the friendship that you have. You in business with your friend, it's a completely different relationship. Like, you can't really operate the same a lot of the time. There's so much else that goes into it, which I definitely didn't realize.
And I think one thing I really learned about people in general through that whole experience was that So yes, business impacts friendships, right? But business in the sense of like monetary gain or like money or, you know, like reputational benefits being dangled in front of people, that completely changes them. And it completely changes like how people behave, react to situations, and also treat you. And I think this applies to everyone. Again, it applies to marriage.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know, in the same way that like I don't know how someone would react in like with like grief. I don't know how someone would react if they won the lottery tomorrow. Would they dump you? Like, would you be gone in the wind? Like, money and like big things like that, they really impact people, and you don't really get a sense for what that impact would be in just a friendship.
Yeah.
And also a friendship that's like not even like that kind of like on a deeper level or a length of time with someone. Like, you just don't know how they react to certain things in life. And like with business, how people react to money and other things being kind of dangled in front of them is really important. And I don't know how to get a sense of that, to be honest, for
That's
like
what I was thinking.
future things like I go into. I think it's just understanding and observing people and like how they behave a bit more. And obviously now having like been through like the experience that we went through, I now know what to look for, I guess, in terms of like how people behave, and how their own like money values and like their money beliefs are. Like, that's always something I've had an awareness on, but I've never like thought to think about it in a business context in terms of like how it would impact me. But now I know, which I think is a great thing. But I think what you touched on there in terms of like things to do if you're going to start a business with your friends, I think there's no level of communication that's too much communication.
Yeah.
To be honest.
True.
Like, even if you think you're being like, oh, like I don't know if this is being like too vulnerable, or oh my god, I don't know if I say this I'm gonna like piss someone off, or like it's gonna derail our business goals.
I think that's the point.
Have to.
Actually do it and see the reaction, because I feel like that's probably what should have been, like what people should really think about is, if you're worried to upset someone, or if you're worried to, not even that, but if you're worried that of the reaction that you're gonna get if like you're being too much, or you know you're trying to, you know, delve into something too deep and you're going to get a negative reaction, let that happen, because then you know up front what you're dealing with. If you don't go there, and if you don't ask the questions, and if you don't really make sure that this is the right decision for you, and you kind of like coast that surface level, those things will come out later, but then it'll be too late, because you will have already signed the deeds, and you'll already like be on your way, and you'll already be attached in a business like relationship before you've even got to know like what you're dealing with in the first place. So I feel like if you're ever in the position where you're like, oh, I want to raise this, but I don't want to piss anyone off, and I don't want, you know, people to think I'm nagging, or whatever the case is, go and raise it, because then you'll have your answers, and raise it sooner rather than later. I think what you said about like realizing the money habits and things is so true. And I think obviously when it's a business setting, that is the driver. Like, you're entering a business because you want to make money, but it's so hard because, like you said as well, when you're in a friendship with someone, sometimes you can tell those things, like the way they deal with money, the way they think about money. I mean, we have so many talks about money between ourselves anyway, so I feel like I've got a good gauge on like your relationship with money and how you deal with it and your values towards it. But only at this point, I feel like maybe looking at it now, those should have been, I don't know, conversations to have like way earlier on, just because you can't really tell how people are going to be when they're sat in front of a business deal that is meant to be shared, and then suddenly they want the whole thing for themselves. Like, you don't know that's going to happen until it happens.
Yeah.
Like, how would you know that in a friendship? But then maybe you do have to just, if this is a person that you do want to really enter this relationship with, like in a business sense, that you do know as a friend, maybe you just have to be extra mindful of any kind of red flags or anything that comes up that makes you think, oh, I wonder if that's the same reaction they would apply in a business setting, and just be extra cautious, because there is no harm in having extra caution towards things like up front. No harm in it. You would save yourself so much ag, so much stress, so much headache if you were extra cautious in the beginning, and it may make things a bit rocky or more difficult to actually enter, but then at that point, hopefully you will enter actually knowing, okay, this is the right decision, and I've covered all bases. I've made sure that anything I was unsure of has been covered off, and I've communicated it. And at that point, you should really see that there won't be any issues if you go through all those like testing and, I guess just making sure that that's the right decision for you. If you do that first, then later on you should have a better success rate of, going into it and then it being smooth. And I wonder for us if, because we've been through experience together, I think what actually made me realise is that we worked well together is because we'd been in such sticky situations in a business sense together, and we had such a similar approach and mindset towards it that I knew if we ever had to deal with that one-on-one, not that either of us would like have the same kind of issues, but if we had any issues, I know that the way we deal with it is the same. And I think that's also...
I think it's not even like the way we deal with it was the same. I feel like we maybe dealt with it in like slightly different ways, but I had so much respect for how you dealt with things that I know that even if I'm not even talking about things coming up with us, like if we have ever any kind of like conflicts or like even just like sticky situations that we need to navigate, I know full well that I like, support and respect the way that you go about things, that I know will be fine. Whereas like I think that it wasn't the case for the previous thing. And I think that just, again, like a lot of my experience with what went down with us, I can just apply it to so many contexts outside of business as well. I think when you see, like, I've seen like other friends like navigate maybe like friendship breakups or or like job losses or anything like that. When you see how people like navigate certain situations and like the way they decide to talk to people or the way they decide to handle like negative things or bad things impulsively, non-impulsively, that's when you start to like build up a sense of respect and like understanding of like people's behaviors when they don't have control, or like when they're like backed up against a wall, and like seeing you react in certain ways and like be so like, I feel like you're just such a calm, like controlled thinker, even though I know that you think of yourself as not like that.
I have my moments.
Like I think that creates a sense of trust basically for me, and I think trust is a massive thing that you need for mixing business and friendships. Communication and trust, like it's easy to say, like if whenever this happened, I asked someone for advice on doing this and they said you need communication and trust, I would have been like, oh cool, I've got both of those. I think you really need to like communicating is hard because I think you need to over communicate, and over communicating is difficult because you feel like you're being annoying, you feel like you're talking too much, you feel like you're just doing too much, when actually you're just putting all your cards out on the table, which is what needs to be done in a business. And then trust is like you do not have that until you know someone well enough and you've seen them go through like a shitty situation. And that's outside of business or within business. And those two things you just absolutely need, I think, before going into anything where you're signing a contract or you're creating a Notion page.
No, I agree. But I also would add to those two things, I think maybe even more than communication, you need comprehension between you, because I look back and I don't think we could have communicated more. Like,
I think I could have.
Really?
I think there's a lot of times I kind of like, I would have, and I still do it. It's something I struggle with is like, in general, I don't really want to rock the boat. I don't really want to like upset someone else, or I'll kind of minimize my worries and be like, they're just me. Whereas like you can I think rocking the boat or expressing your own worries, better to have them out and then like discuss them and then bring them down, rather than like convincing yourself that they're not worries,
that you shouldn't raise it at all. Now I don't know, it's hard because maybe communication wasn't always strong, maybe up until the end when we decided to really like put all cards on the table. But I also do think that you can communicate as much as you want, but if you're not understanding points of view, and if people are not willing to like see where things have gone wrong and what the issues actually are, you can say it as much as you want, but they ain't hearing it. So you do need to also acknowledge when people are just like committed to misunderstanding you and committed to not wanting to like hear that they're wrong, I guess, because you can get in those situations where you're communicating loads of people and you're saying your piece, you're explaining your point of view, they're explaining their point of view, but if there's no actual comprehension, you're not actually understanding and hearing the other person, then that kind of renders your communication absolutely meaningless. So I feel like that's also another level to maybe the type of person that you decide to go in business with. And like you said, you can spot, especially if you're friends with someone beforehand, there are ways of spotting these things before you even enter that position. This isn't a type of person that you picked off the street and you've thought, oh, you look like the kind of person that's good to do business with. You know this person to some degree, and there are interactions that you've had with them, and I feel like it's more a case of making sure that you are not overlooking things in that relationship that are definitely going to be brought into a business relationship, but it's going to be exacerbated more and multiplied because of the intensity of that relationship, more so than maybe your friendship was. Because friendships, to a degree, even if you've known someone for a long time, they're still much more surface level than you would have a business relationship with that same person, just by the nature of how much responsibility you have for each other, like we were talking about, and just the nature of the fact that you've literally birthed something together and you have that, that same input that you have to put in to make it grow, and the projection that you want to see come from it. There's a lot of work and effort and time spent together, and so much that goes into that, versus of course you spend time and effort on your friendships, but not nearly as much as a business that you're trying to grow. So the little red flags or things that you see in your friendships, just know that they will double, triple in size when you enter like a business partnership with someone. So that's also something to just be aware of, because then you will be making your decision more with clarity of, okay, well, would I be happy to see that more often and deal with it more? And is that something that's actually going to be detrimental, or something that we can work through, I guess, in the end?
Yeah. It's good to see like business is almost like a magnifying glass on your friendship, if it is a friendship that you're mixing into it.
Well, we think we'll leave that one there. I hope that was really insightful for you guys to listen in on. It's not really something that we have spoken much about, but I think knowing how many people do jump into businesses with friends, and knowing our own experiences, I mean, I've done it many times at this point, so I feel like there's so many lessons to be learned, and hopefully you guys can take away some like learning points from this, and just know that if you are intending to do the same, it can be an absolutely incredible thing. I mean, if you're friends with someone, you obviously like that person, and to start a business with them and like a passion project, that can only like build up your friendship at the same time as well. But these are obviously lessons that we've learned from previous experiences as well, that we wanted to bring to the table and just make you aware of, because I think it's important. And I wish I knew these things when I got into other situations. So they're all learning curves and moments of, we can use looking forward and into new experiences. So if you did like this episode, make sure you give it a thumbs up if you're watching us on YouTube, and comment down below as well if you've had a similar experience, or what kind of experience you've had mixing business and friendships. Would you recommend it to anyone? And if you are watching or listening, should I say, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you give us a little rating and let us know how you're finding it. And with that being said, we'll catch you in the next one. Bye guys.
Bye.